Hello there and welcome to the channel. I'm Dr. Tom Pepper and I'm going to be doing something a little bit different today. I'm going to be putting forward my own views. Like I said last time, I really don't like it when YouTubers will have a go at other YouTubers and then don't put forward their own views to be criticized or critiqued. So that's what I'll do here. I am going to try and marshal my sort of rambly thoughts into an argument where I try and establish in premise one that big sort of positive change, the kind of change I'd like to see, is not going to come from above. Like the people that are already in power aren't really likely to change anything really for the better or the worse, I don't think. Most of the video will be me trying to establish that premise. But the second more positive premise is that there is a lot you can do on a small scale, sort of ethical standpoint. Like there are ways you can live your own life well, even if that help or that assistance doesn't come from above. So a little bit of a rant this time. I will try and keep it to one video, and then next time, hopefully within the next week, I'll be doing a video on a Jim Sterling video that annoyed me recently, and then maybe some sort of introduction to British politics. I really like to get stuck into that for those of you that aren't too into British politics, whether you're British or not. But today it's going to be my own views, so here we go. First of all then, my own views. So my own views I'll just go over very quickly, and then I'll talk about why I don't think they're going to be achieved anytime soon. I would describe myself as economically a socialist. I don't want to spend too much time arguing for this because frankly I don't understand economics that well. I'm sure there are some of you in the audience laughing at that because you're thinking, well, of course, he's a socialist, he doesn't understand economics. My essential principles are that poverty sucks. Poverty is probably something we could get rid of. Like, I don't mean relative poverty. Some people are probably always going to be poorer than others. But like absolute poverty, a state of poverty, is something we can deal with. And it's something I think government should do through redistribution of wealth. So essentially taking money from the rich people that already have it and then giving it to poor people that don't. That just seems nice to me. I don't really have a strong sort of mathematical economic model for that. It seems like a good thing to do. I don't really regard it as theft because of some sort of vague principle that like they sort of stole it from the workers in the first place. I'm generally really quite down on capitalism, not out of any sort of economic thing again, but just out of sort of an ethical standpoint. I think it makes people live lives that they don't really want to live because they need to do so much work to get the basics, like just food and rent and water. They need to live lives they really don't want to live because most jobs under capitalism are crappy jobs that people don't want. Like in a state of nature, people would not be like, ooh, I hope one day I can work in a call center or whatever. These jobs are bad, and I think any kind of economic model that would redistribute wealth would take the pressure off people to do those jobs which aren't essential jobs. People might be forced into doing farming, but at least that's essential, and you get to see sort of the benefits to wider society as opposed to the benefits to just a very small group of people at the top. In contrast to my economic socialism, I am a social liberal, which I've argued for more often on the channel. I think the government, the state, should keep out of like all social decisions. So obviously classically that would be religion, which is not really a battleground over anymore. Now I would also like them to keep off social media, and I would also like social media to stop putting so many rules on social media so that people can communicate freely. But sexuality, language, morals, all that stuff, I just want the government to back off that. I think people should be treated as free, rational thinking adults, and you shouldn't be constantly wagging your finger at them. I think we pretty much have a good social liberal order now in Britain and kind of in the West. I think it's kind of fine. Like there are things you could improve, I think, around maybe gambling, polygamy, drugs is a big one. I think drugs should be liberalized because you should treat people like adults. And if they want to do something that's bad for their health, you should let them take that risk. So those are my two main views on economy and society. That's why, if you detect any bias from me, that should be where it's coming from. My arguments will be based on those principles. I think those are good things. The rest of this video is going to be me explaining why I don't think we're going to get any change in either of those directions and might actually be moving away from those things. And then the end of the video will show why that should be okay anyway. So this is premise one. The powerful institutions we have currently aren't going to do anything to advance economic socialism or to defend the social liberalism we already have. Now, in part, that's just due to funding. Obviously, all the major Western parties need funding. It's going to come from rich people. Those people got rich out of the current capitalist system, so why would they want anything to change, right? I feel like America has things worse than us over here in Britain because of the two-party system. It just makes it so difficult to get any kind of change through. I mean, that's becoming obvious now if it wasn't obvious already. Like Obama came in on this huge wave of hope and change and everything. didn't change much. Trump, people hoped he'd really change things, but honestly, did he? Like, what was his lasting legacy? What's he changed that Biden couldn't just change back as soon as he came in? And now we have Biden, who didn't really even offer any change and got all the progressives to vote for him anyway. The two-party system is just so poor that anyone who does want change is just going to kind of be ignored, and the conservative center is always going to be appealed to because most people want most things to stay the same. They disagree over where they want change, and that means they splinter. While the conservative core, who just want things to stay the same, will just coalesce around the two main parties. And I think this two-party system causes the conservatism because, like, why really bother changing, right? Like, both parties know they're going to be back in power in 4 or 8 years. Like, there's no incentive to succeed and no punishment for failure. And that applies to the UK too. Like, politicians here continually screw up. Like, by their own standards, they don't do the jobs they wanted to do, and they just fail up, right? They just get another promotion. I don't know if it's like a where the body's buried thing, or just that everyone involved is so scared of losing their own job, they don't want to see anyone else lose their job for incompetence because it might set a bad precedent. But in America, it's particularly bad, I think, because there's no chance of either major party dying out. So who cares if you lose an election? You'll be back in a few years. It's fine. I don't know. Maybe local Democrats are doing really well and are achieving like some sort of economic socialism on a small scale level, like a state level or a city level. If they are, I never hear about it. They seem very conservative. The Democrats seem mostly concerned with keeping things the way they are and not rocking the boat too much. In the UK, we don't have that problem, at least a two-party problem, because we have a multi-party system, but we do have like rampant corruption to the point where like no one even really seems to talk about it anymore. Like, we have the Tories in power, their main opposition, the Labour Party, keep pointing out how corrupt they are, and no one really cares because everyone expects their politicians to be corrupt liars now, which is a shame, but that's a reasonable supposition to have. I mean, I'll get onto it in a second, but the caliber of politicians in the UK at least is very poor. If America's problem, at least in part, I think, comes from that party problem and the structure, the problems we have in the UK are purely personnel. These politicians are just useless. They don't even, I think, see themselves as having a use in changing society for the better or worse anymore. In the old days, you used to get a bad kind of politician because they want to be greedy or they were power hungry, so they go into politics. But now the real money isn't in politics anymore. Politicians sold it all off. The real power is in finance or big tech. You go there if you want money or power. If you want money or power and you're not brainy enough to get into tech or finance, you go into politics. They are just these useless grey people with no vision. I'm talking about left and right now. There's no even appetite for change. They don't know what they want the country to look like in 50 years or 5 years. No economic planning, no social planning, which, like I say, I'm a social liberal, so I'm happy about that. But it's just so bland. It's just this shower of overpaid, over-promoted middle managers who only care about their next career step. And it shows. Like, I can't tell you what political developments there have been in the UK in the last, 10 years, other than us leaving the EU, which they did, completely reluctantly. They didn't want that change. Labour now aren't looking too distinct from the Tories. They are less corrupt and maybe less incompetent, but only because they're not in power. As soon as they get in power, I think everyone assumes the same thing will happen to them. And even if they do get in and somehow manage to not become corrupt or display their incompetence, it's just not their job to run the country anymore. We still talk about it like it is, but really MPs run the government. Businesses run the country. Not like, in the hands of a few people. It's very, dispersed, the power in this country. So lots of people have a bit of power, and they're the people at the head of business and big tech and finance and that kind of thing. And then there's a whole lot more people who have basically no power at all. And those people, except for some exceptions, aren't doing what the government tells them to do most of the time. They're doing what their employer tells them to do. And that's why I'm saying that the power in the country lies in the hands of the employers, right? Because they're the ones that actually control what people do on a day-to-day basis. And this is obvious in sort of social rules that are creeping in now. People losing their jobs because of saying the wrong thing on Twitter, maybe, or for making the wrong kind of remark. This is just arbitrary power enforced by managers, by bosses, right? The government might not be able to legislate against you, but at least the government has laws. So if you break a law, it has to do something about it. But your boss doesn't. That's the scary thing. It's not that your boss can fire you for something you say on Twitter. It's that they can also choose to not fire you if you're valuable enough. But maybe if the kind of worker who is pro-union, they don't like you that much and they're happy to let you go. It's this completely arbitrary power, and it's eroding social liberalism. People are afraid to say what they might feel, and I'm sure some of those things are very unpleasant, but they should be allowed to say them without having to worry about losing their jobs, which is the big threat now, not the government threat of being sent to jail, which I doubt anyone really worries about when they say the wrong thing on Twitter. And it is such a shame because there were glimmers of hope. Social media was this brand new thing and allowed people to communicate person to person, and now sort of the powers that be seem to be doing all they can to try and limit that from happening. And part of that is the whole sort of, conspiracy theorists, don't trust what you read online, listen to the official sources, don't listen to what your fellow country people are saying about their country, listen to the people who are in charge. But now social media, like any kind of media, films, video games, once people realize it's a force for something, they will try and control it. And old media is obviously fighting a losing war against new media, but they'd certainly try and clamp down on that, right? News stations don't want you getting your news on Twitter. They want you to get it from them, so they maintain power. Government's pretty much the same thing. They want to represent the official narrative, and they don't want that to be questioned. So it's happened with movies, plays in the past as well, video games. The powerful people will come to control it and use it to their own ends, and that's going to happen more and more. That's my one solid prediction, is the liberal use of social media, that's going. That'll get worse and worse until what you can say is very restricted. And I know it's kind of a conspiratorial thing again, but the big one for me was the Hunter Biden thing during the US election, where news outlets were publishing stories about his laptop and about what may or may not have been on there, and links to those stories were being shut down by social media companies. The only reason I can think for that, because I don't think they've done that at any other point in human history, was to protect Joe Biden and was to get him to win the election, because that particular powerful group of people wanted Biden in. One big thing I do want to mention is obviously COVID-19 restrictions. That has been a big change from government. So you might think, well, governments do still have a lot of power because they can do that. It's true. It seems, at least in this country, all that stuff progressed on purely economic grounds. In Wales, at least, one of the last things we got, one of the last freedoms that they so kindly gave back to us, was the freedom to have people in our own homes and to hug people, right? Because no one was making money off having people in your own homes and hugging. So it was very clear that the football games opened up first. Is that because they're not dangerous? No, it's because people make money from it. So even when the government do these big sweeping changes, they're only really interested in the economic output, right? It's just a game of Sims. The people involved, their thoughts and feelings and freedoms really don't matter as long as you get the economic outcome you were looking for. But as a fan of social liberty, this kind of government clout is the opposite of what I'm looking for. I don't want the government to get more involved in my social life. I want it to back off. I want it to get more involved in people's economic lives because I think it actually has a chance of running the economy. I don't think you can run society, at least not for long, and places like Australia are starting to find that out. There have been other glimmers of hope recently. We had Corbyn over here in the UK, who was kind of like Bernie Sanders, except he actually got to be in charge of the party. He really would have been a force for radical change, and probably the kind of change I'd like to see, mostly focusing on economic issues and not BS cultural or social issues. But the Empire struck back. He's out of power now. Trump as well did look like he was going to change things. I don't think he would have changed things for the better, but at least it looked like a politician who was really going to shake things up. I don't think he did in any substantial way. A lot of draining the swamp, cutting back on bureaucracy stuff sounds quite good to me, but I don't think it ever really happened. And if it did, he just replaced it with other swamp creatures. So yeah, the appetite for change that was sort of 5 years ago, I think has probably been lessened because it didn't work out in the US or the UK. So this is the more positive part of the video. I think people should look for small-scale ethical change instead of big-scale socio-political change. I guess it's kind of like the hippie mantra of tune in, turn off, drop out, whatever it is. The world is going to carry on doing what it's doing, so you just focus on being a good person and doing good things. When I say ethical, a lot of you might think I mean moral, but I really don't. I mean ethical in a broader sense. So like the way you live your life. And that might be completely non-moral, but it just means focusing on you and your actions and not wider society or politics at large. The good thing about this is it's fairly easy, right? I mean, it's not easy necessarily to do all the time, but like, you know who in your community needs help. Like, gun to your head, you would know what to do if someone said you have to go out and help people, right? Like, it's homeless people, it's the elderly, it's the disabled, it's people living in poverty. I really struggled recently. In the middle of lockdown, I sort of became unemployed, basically. I've been looking for a job since then. I just wasn't sure what to go for because I didn't want to give up like a vast portion of my life working really hard at something that's ultimately pointless out of making somebody else rich, right? Like, I don't want to bother doing that. So I'm now exclusively looking for jobs in the charity sector. Now I realize that's not very well paid, and if you've got kids or a mortgage, it might be very difficult to do that. But if you can do that at all, I would implore you, like the one message I really want to ram home, quit your job if you've just got one of those crappy capitalist nothing jobs. To quit your job, really think about your life choices and just try and do things to help people. I know I sound really preachy, but it's kind of the point of the video. Like, you know that you can help people. You can devote your time to doing this and you can do a lot of good. Don't wait for like socialism to come, because it's not coming. There's no indication it's coming because the people that are in power don't want it to come. But if everyone takes my advice and just tries to help one another, I think you can get a lot of good out of that. Given me in like what I want in life, and obviously what everyone wants can be different. And if you do want to be rich, then, you know, get into capitalism and just hope you make it to being rich at the end. But I mean, I honestly think it's not just like sort of ethical good thing to do, it is the smart thing to do. Like, if you want to try and get rich, more than likely you will be taken for a fool. You will be underpaid and undervalued, and you'll never get to the, you know, pot of gold at the end of that rainbow. It's a real problem. There's a real feeling, at least in the UK, I think, that connection of hard work and reward is just gone. So if it is, why bother working hard, like for nothing, to make this very rich group of people slightly richer than they already are, when you can really, really help people? And do not like think that slacktivism is like a way of getting around this either. Sort of posting the right things on YouTube for one thing, like I do, or on Twitter. Like, you can't just talk about doing the good things. Like, there's a lot of socialist YouTubers out there who I think they're doing a lot of good by persuading people to socialism. But if that never sort of culminates in political success, which it won't, because there's absolutely no political willpower from the people in those political parties, then what's the point? What good have they done? They've just taken like a load of capitalist people and made them have a few more socialist thoughts than they did before, but they're not going to act any more socialist. How would they? Like, these people do nothing practical. Unionize if you can as well. That's the other good practical thing you can do. You know, workers' unions, we kind of scrapped them in the UK in the 1980s for what seemed like good reasons at the time, I'm sure. But now that contract between worker and employer is so one-sided in favor of the employer. I really don't know how anyone can stand it. So there it is. In summary, I would say I'm an economic socialist and a social liberal. Social liberalism, I fear, is being eroded by big business who want to control your life. Government aren't going to stop it because they don't really have that much power, and I don't think they have the inclination anyway. I'm also an economic socialist, and I would like to see government redistribute wealth more. My practical advice to you is to quit your job if you work in like a nothing capitalist job and just try and do something to help people. If you get paid for doing that, fantastic. If not, do what you can in your local communities to just improve people's lives. Resist passively where you can. Obviously, I can't advocate for anyone breaking any laws, and genuinely, obviously, there's no point in political violence. We won't get anywhere. The state will just strike back even harder. But passive resistance, like just quitting your job, for example, that's kind of passive resistance. Just not getting involved in capitalist structures could be a great way, en masse, of enacting real positive change. So yeah, live well and be excellent to each other, I guess, is what I'm saying. But thank you very much for watching this ramble. Like I say, we'll be more normal next time. I'll be just critiquing a Jim Sterling video where he argues against social liberalism very poorly. Until then, please leave a like. If you like the video, share it with anyone else you think might like it. Leave a comment down below if you'd like to get a discussion going, anything you agree with or disagree with and want to challenge me on. I'll try to get back to you. And tune in next time. Till then, I've been Dr. Tom Pepper. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.